Hey everyone, it's me, Gavin, again. Today's gonna be part 2 of the last episode that we did, which is catching up with a bunch of series that I caught up with over the past, 4 or so years, which you definitely watch, I assume, because you're a dedicated fan. I'm not gonna do any of the same preamble that I did last time, because by this point you should know what this series is gonna be about, at least for these first few episodes. But yeah, today we're just gonna get into more of the series, starting with 2 that fans of my channel should already know that I've actually gotten into. Firstly, Metal Gear Solid. So, the first, video I made that really popped off was the Metal Gear Solid one. Evidently, it's probably because I released it around the same time the Master Collection was coming out, and so people looking for Metal Gear Solid videos, especially ones about even the older games, would have been, looked for and searched for and clicked on. And I'm glad that I did it then and not, when I beat the series, because I had started Metal Gear Solid in, April of 2023, March-ish, and then I beat 5 the summer right after that. But that's pretty much all I did that summer, to be honest. I just kind of woke up, played Metal Gear Solid 5, and went back to sleep. But that's because I was trying to 100% the game. And I guess to take us back to the beginning with Metal Gear Solid 1, Metal Gear Solid's one of the highest series that I had planned on getting into for a long time, and so when I finally got to Metal Gear Solid 1, I was definitely hesitant, but that's mostly because I'm very wary of any game or franchise or whatever that sees, worldwide appraise, and I never hear anything really bad about it. So when I hear that Metal Gear Solid 1 is one of the greatest video games of all time, and I've never heard anything bad about that game ever, like a Persona 5, which we will get to at some point in the series, probably, I was worried. And then I played Metal Gear Solid 1, and it was actually, really fucking good. That's, one of the best aged games I've ever played in my life. Which isn't to say that it's good because it's aged well. There are a lot of games that haven't exactly aged at all, but still suck dick. But the thing with Metal Gear Solid is that it was just a good game, and I didn't have to make any stipulations about it, oh, it's a good game if you ignore all the this, that, and the third thing. Oh, it's a good game for its time. I don't have to do any of that bullshit. No, it's just a good game. Obviously, it's got problems. If you've seen my Metal Gear Solid video, you know that I hate the boss fights, because most of them really suck. I see no need to go over all of them. That's my videos for. But, the only good boss fights are Vulcan Raven, and that's it. I said fights plural, but I remembered there's actually only one, is Vulcan Raven, because it takes the elements of the game that you've already been playing with and expands upon them and challenges you on them. And God forbid, the arena you fight the boss in changes as the fight goes on. It's not like a Sniper Wolf where it's just, alright, now hit her a couple of times. Or a Hind D, where they pretend the arena changes, but all they really did was cut off an area of the map that you weren't using anyway, because the most efficient way to avoid the gunfire is just to go behind the box. And the boss's behavior changes with Vulcan Raven. He doesn't just, he doesn't just knock some stuff over and change the map. He also changes how he behaves. He's gonna react quicker to, seeing a Nikita flying at him. Or not, no, yeah, Nikita. He's gonna get faster, and then you have to change up the ways you actually, do damage to him. You can't just, shoot Nikita down a hallway and then let it hit him. You have to hit him around a corner, or wait for when he turns a corner. You have to start putting more mines down, but you're also going to have to keep your mine detector out, because if you don't, you're going to get hit by your own mines. Everything comes together in Vulcan Raven. It's just such a good fight. But then minus the boss fights, like I said, Metal Gear Solid is just a good game. It's a very solid stealth game. For how much you do, how much time you spend looking at the Solid on radar, people have said that is one of the few negatives I've heard about Metal Gear Solid, and even then it's not usually a universal negative, but one of the few negatives I hear about Metal Gear Solid is that the Soliton radar is just so powerful that you spend more of the game looking at that than you do the actual game. And I think that's a fair criticism, but not one that affects the game all that much. Because in reality, when it comes to the Soliton radar, it's really just the most straightforward way to do stealth in hallways. Here's where the guys can see. Find your way around them. Now, of course, the series will, expand upon this in 3 and 4 and 5, and maybe Peace Walker, I wouldn't know. But, just having there be straightforward lines of sight, it works out. That it definitely assists the game's very linear geometry to have guys just be able to see certain things. And even then, even with just their sight lines being the way they are, it's not like that's all it is. It's not like they walk back and forth along this predetermined path. Like, in the original Metal Gear, I can understand that being a criticism, because it's just, there's no real interaction with the system. But in Metal Gear Solid, you can purposely lure guards, you can accidentally lure guards by making sounds in puddles, or, making footprints. There's a lot of things that guards do in Metal Gear Solid that isn't just look in their predetermined path. And then even along their predetermined path, a lot of them are just designed in ways that will make you have to get creative. I know one in particular is in the weapons basement. There, when you come back to there after the revolver fight, there's going to be 3 guards patrolling the area instead of just like the one. Actually, no, I think the first time you go there isn't anyone guarding it, but whatever. Whenever you go back there for the sniper rifle, there's 3 guys patrolling it, and the way they patrol isn't just like, you know, 3 guys on 3 separate lines going back and forth. No, they each make their own circles, but those circles intersect at points where you can't go after one without having to go after a different one first. And so you walk into the room and it becomes not just an execution puzzle of how do I, you know, do this, how do I get rid of them? It's also a logic puzzle of which one do I have to get rid of first to not let the other one see me. Or if you're skilled enough, you don't even have to go through that order. You can just get them in the small intervals where they're not seeing each other and then like choke them out or something, which is another criticism I have of the game, which is that the choke out maneuver is weirdly esoteric, where you have to get up close to someone and without touching any of the controls, you know, spam the square button, which is insane to me because it means you have to run up to someone, stop dead in your tracks, and then press the button. And a lot of the times that means you're either going to stop short of them, which to be fair, there's a pretty lenient area on the grab, so it's not that bad, but you're either going to stop short of them, or in a lot of cases, stop too close to them, and then they'll feel you up on their back, and then, you know, everyone in the entire fucking compound knows where you are. And I guess if I had to levy another criticism at MGS1, it's that a lot of the gear goes unused. Like, outside of the silenced pistol and the assault rifle, I don't really remember using any of the weapons, like, ever, outside of very, 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 very niche use cases. Which you can argue is kind of what Metal Gear Solid 1 is about, is finding those niche use cases for every one of the things you have. But even among them, it's like, I wouldn't call the sniper rifle a niche use case because I use it for one boss fight that it's literally required for, and because I can use it on the weapons platform, or the Rex weapons platform. I wouldn't call the Stinger a niche use case because I can use it on the two boss fights it's required for, and then never anything else. Cold medicine, I don't even know how you get a cold in MGS1. I know how you get it in the other games, but in MGS1, it's never, like, happened to me. So, a lot of times I have the cold medicine in my inventory by the end of the game, and then it just never gets used, because it never became a problem. I think it might be if you, like, sit in a puddle for too long, but I don't know in which situation that would ever happen. So, I don't know. But anyway, that's enough about Metal Gear Solid 1. Again, if you want more thoughts on, like, any of the Metal Gear Solid games, I have a video about that, so, like, go watch it. A lot of people allegedly liked it, or at least they watched it. I can't say for sure that they liked it, because the like-dislike ratio is actually pretty harsh. And part of that might be because of Metal Gear Solid 2, which is a game that I don't really like all that much. And it's because of, like, 2 things. Partially, it's the gameplay. And in the Metal Gear Solid video, I actually praise the gameplay conceptually, because from an idea standpoint, a lot of the things presented in Metal Gear Solid 2 are like the perfect follow-up to Metal Gear Solid 1. Everything is presented better, well, aside from the codec, but for the most part, gameplay-wise, everything's presented better. There are more things done with the camera and the guards. I mean, everything you need to know about how Metal Gear Solid 2 improves upon 1 is done in the tanker chapter, or, yeah, it's a tanker. They don't call it the big shell chapter, do they? I don't know, it doesn't matter. The part where you play a snake. Everything you need to know about how the game is better is done in that section of the game, and it's really just a really good way to sell Metal Gear Solid 2. And the problem with that, as I might have mentioned in the video, is that, and on my streams, since I also streamed all the Metal Gear Solid games, well, not 4 yet, but I need to get my hands on a PS3 for that. But the problem I outlined is that 2 just doesn't really make use of any of the improvements that it makes. Like, yeah, guards are way more complex than they ever have been, from just a 1-game difference, but it doesn't really matter, because you can take care of all the guards in the exact same way. You take out your silenced tranq pistol, you shoot them in the head, and then they're asleep, and that's how you deal with, like, every guard in the game. And in the few times where you don't have that, and during the few parts of the game where you don't have that, you can always just take out your handy-dandy chokeout maneuver, which again is going to control way better because MGS2 has better controls than the first game. You know, you have an analog stick instead of just the D-pad, which again is supposed to be an improvement. It's just a better way to control the game, but it results, because the rest of the game wasn't, like, changed to compensate for that, it results in just chokeouts being way easier, which, again, not like you need to do them anyway since you have the tranq pistol. So, as far as I'm concerned, MGS2 is just, like, the greatest example of missed potential ever in terms of a sequel. And then there's the story, and I understand that Metal Gear Solid 2's story is like revolutionary and insanely not impactful, but like, you know, prolific, because Kojima predicted a lot of things very accurately about the way our world would adapt to technology and information and whatnot. But the problem with that kind of story is that it's all insanely, you know, backloaded towards the end of the game. If you're gonna make a game that's about something, it's trying to, you know, portray a message about things, you're kind of obligated to make the entire story, you know, littered with the aspects of this theme or message or thing you're trying to portray. If Metal Gear Solid 2 was a story about information, really taking on the espionage part of tactical espionage action, then I feel like it would all come together way, 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 way better at the end of the game when you find out, oh, this is what the game's like really about. But as Metal Gear Solid 2 stands, it's just kind of a slightly different version of Metal Gear Solid 1's structure, and then at the end they go, oh, and by the way, this story's about something completely different, and the way the game ends is going to be really esoteric and strange, and, you know, hopefully never followed up upon, because it's kind of meant to be ambiguous, and you're not supposed to know what happened after this. Uh-oh, Metal Gear Solid 4 came out, but we'll get there, we'll get there. Yeah, I want to like Metal Gear Solid 2's story a lot, but the problem is that it just doesn't really have one until the very end of the game. And the very end of the game, it's not like a twist where it recontextualizes everything that happened beforehand. It tries to do that with the whole, you know, or the S3 program and whatnot. But the problem is that you look back on it and you go, well, not really though. Jack is just kind of like a guy going through things that he was told to do because he is a soldier. And then you look back on it and it's like, oh, this is all for this grand plan. And it's like, well, this doesn't really feel like any story about manipulation of information or anything. There was no information being manipulated. Jack was just told to do a thing by a person he thought was a different person. Because even if he was told it was a different person, even if it wasn't the Colonel, which it brings up a lot of questions about how Jack even received his mission. Like, did the AI contact him with just the phone message, or like with just a phone call from its Colonel voice and was like, Jack, whatever your last name is, go and do this mission. And we sent like a mailbox full of your gear to your house. Do not meet me in person. I'm really sick right now. I got COVID, like 20 years before that's gonna happen. So, or actually, it's kind of more like 10 years, because Metal Gear Solid 2 takes place in, what, 2008? So yeah, like 12 years. It's really just not a story about information for the most part. It's a story about Ryan doing a mission, and then it turns out that the villain is still the villain. He's just not the only villain, because Solidus is still the villain of the game. You know, he still wants to get Arsenal gear and do a bunch of villainous things with the Arsenal gear, but he just happened to also be fighting the Patriots, who are the grander villain in terms of the scope of the Metal Gear Solid series, which even then wasn't necessarily the point at the end of Metal Gear Solid 2. It wasn't about like, oh, here's this new big villain, big threat that we're gonna take on. It's more like, you know, the big threat is not a thing or a person. It's a concept, it's information, it's how we deal with that information, and that will, you know, shape how the world develops from here. That's the villain we have to fight. But again, that's not what most of the game was about, and it sure isn't what the games became about after Metal Gear Solid 2. But again, we'll get there, which I suppose brings us to Metal Gear Solid 3, the best game in the Metal Gear Solid pentology, because obviously it is a pentology. I know that Portable Ops is like semi-canon or something, but Portable Ops sucks, so we're not counting it. And obviously Peace Walker is canon, it's incredibly important to 5, but that game also sucks, so I'm not talking about it. And I didn't play most of it. I got up to like mission 12-ish, I want to say. It was something in the teens, because I remember it was the second tank fight, and I was doing it, and I said, wait a minute, this is fucking boring, I don't want to do this no more. And I looked at the story, and I was like, wait a minute, this is fucking boring, I don't want to look at this anymore. And I just stopped right there. But anyway, Metal Gear Solid 3. Like I said, like I've said a couple of times at this point, I talked about it already in my Metal Gear Solid 3 video, but to give you the shortened version, Metal Gear Solid 3 just makes a lot of improvements in the structure of the game that MGS2 did not. So it actually gets to take advantage of all the new parts of Metal Gear Solid 3's, you know, gameplay and additions. First-person aiming isn't just look down a hallway and shoot a guy anymore. Now it's, you know, you have to look carefully at where guys are and to know where you're aiming. And you can't just shoot willy-nilly anymore, because ammo is a little bit more of a scarce resource, and suppressors are an even more scarce resource, assuming you aren't constantly shaking guys down. So you actually have to, like, play the game well, and the game incentivizes you to play the game well by rewarding you for playing the game well, which, you know, I'm like doing this voice right now about oh, like you play the game well, but there's just a lot of games that have interesting systems but don't ever like challenge you to engage with them. Off the top of my head, I am completely blanking, but I'm sure we'll talk about some of them at some point. But it's Metal Gear Solid 3 is like one of the perfect examples of a feedback loop of skill in a game. When you play the game well, you're rewarded for it by being able to continue to play the game well. It just works, in the words of the glorious Todd Howard, which is ironic because none of his games do. I don't think we'll ever talk about a Bethesda game on this series. Well, I guess we're going to talk about Doom at some point, probably, but I'm never going to talk about, like, a real Bethesda game on the series, because they're all like, no, tangent, let's not get into it. Metal Gear Solid 3, yeah, I talked about the gameplay. Like I said, again, in the video, the bosses are just really good. And there are a few kind of stinkers in there, like the pain kind of sucks. It's just shooting a guy with B armor for a little bit until he gives up. But honestly, the bad bosses are really in the minority. Aside from the pain, I can't really think of who else there is. I think what's interesting about one of the 3's boss fights, which is the Fury, when I originally played the game, like I played MGS3 Substance through a very legal PS2, and he was like my favorite fight in the game. Like, no, because I feel like I like the end, but I feel like I kind of cheesed him. So yeah, no, among 3's boss fights, I think the Fury was and probably still is my favorite, because it does a lot of the Vulcan Raven things with, how the boss fight is structured. But what's interesting about that is that, the first time I played him, he was decently challenging, but I think I beat him first try. But then, when I played the Master Collection version of 3, which is just 3 HD, on my stream, I got fucked up by the Fury, to the point where I had to, like, start using the sprinkler trick on him, just to even, like, have a chance at getting done with the boss, which is not something I did my first time playing the game, and I know I didn't, because I didn't know it existed. I had to get told by someone in my stream chat to be like, yo, you can shoot the sprinklers, and yeah, no, the Fury fucked me up. No idea why, but that's just how it ended up. But even, bashing my head against that wall for like an hour, and even to the point where I was getting a little bit frustrated with it, I still can't say the Fury is a bad boss, and like I said, he's probably still my favorite, because, from a design standpoint, he's just kind of perfect. I can't really complain, or sorry, no, I can't make any objective complaints about him. Like, subjectively, I can say that I got mad that I was losing a bunch, but he's the best designed boss in the game. I can't really say much else other than that. I guess he has competition from, like, probably Revolver Ocelot or the boss, but for the most part, the Fury is just the fucking best. And then, outside the gameplay, in terms of, like, the story, 3 is just, it's a good story. It's not, like, fantastic, but it's a good emulation of, like, classic spy thrillers. It's got a lot of the same tone and, I don't want to say story beats, but, like, set pieces, I want to say. Like, sneaking through some big facility towards the end of the story, or, having epic, hugging time with the femme fatale in a log cabin, which, still not 100% sure why Snake did that in MGS3, but, Liquid, Solid, and Solid has had to have someone be their surrogate mother. And so, there's not really much else to talk about with MGS3, it's just really solid. Metal Gear Solid, even. Which finally brings us to the dreaded Metal Gear Solid 4. Again, I mostly go over a lot of things in my video, so I have to give you the shortened version here, but Metal Gear Solid 4, gameplay-wise, it's just too easy. The stealth is basically nothing, because Octo Camo is just sit still for a bit and you're basically invisible. And then the combat is where the game is, like, actually challenging, but the combat's also not very fun, because it's not like a Vulcan Raven or a Fury, where it's taking the combined aspects of the game and trying to make something, challenging out of those. It just sort of puts a gun in your hand and says, hey, the game's now a third-person shooter. Go off, King. Like, which, is it the Rage? The flying one in Metal Gear Solid 4. That's not really, like, a boss fight. That's not anything in Metal Gear Solid. It's just a flying enemy that you have to shoot a couple of times. What part of that is in any way Metal Gear Solid? The game is just a third-person shooter, and you're fighting a flying boss in the third-person shooter. What are we doing here? Like, I get that it's called Guns of the Patriots, but fucking come on, we were gonna take that literally. The entire game is just guns, third-person shooter. There's like 50 billion guns for you to buy, even though you're not gonna use half of them. Shit, you're not gonna use 3/4 of them. Off the top of my head, the only ones I can say I used were an SMG for boss fights, the silenced pistol for stealth, and the railgun for boss fights after whenever you unlock the railgun. For mostly geckos, actually. The psycho, not mantis. Which one's this? Well, I mean, it's technically Psycho Mantis, but you know what I mean. The psychic one in Metal Gear Solid 4. Which that's another thing about the bosses, that they're just not memorable. They are not, like, anything at all. Like, I fucking hate Dead Cell in MGS2, but Fat Man is, like, a really funny guy. He's impossible to forget. Vamp is, one of the worst characters the series introduced, so he's very easy to not forget. Fortune is also one of the worst characters the series ever introduced, so she's also not very easy to forget. Dead Cell sucks, but they are very memorable. The fucking MGS, the Beauty and the Beast unit in MGS4, they just, like, kind of exist. They just don't really do anything for most of the game, and they show up at the end of their section to be a boss fight, and then Drebin goes, yo, you want to, like, listen to a lot of backstory for, like, 5 minutes? And the answer is always no, but the answer is always yes. But anyway, I digress. We're going to talk about the story in a second. But yeah, the gameplay is just a third-person shooter, even with the psychic one fight. And like I said in the video, the only good boss fight is Laughing Octopus, because Laughing Octopus is like an actual Metal Gear Solid fight. Crazy, I know. But there's stealth tactical espionage action. You have to think about where Octopus would be hiding, and then even among Octopus's hiding, you have to figure out, you know, which spot is she in now, and you have to, like, really use a discerning eye. And it's fun, and it's a really good mechanic because it's reverse stealth, a thing that I think that every stealth game should incorporate at some point. Like in the Batman Arkham series, you're you're kind of always, you know, Batman, because, like, obviously, but there's never any situation that you're put in where someone is stealthing against you, and I think it's a bit of a missed opportunity, because I think the best way to portray, or to like, come full circle on every stealth mechanic you've built for a stealth game is to have it be used against the player and see how it feels. Octo Camo, for as much as I hate it in MGS4, it is insanely fun when it's used against the player, because Octopus hides in some really interesting spots, and you really have to look closely to find her a lot of the times. There are a few where she's just, like, not really trying all that hard, but for the most part, Octo Camo is really well implemented against the player, because the player can actually make, like, decisions and interpretations with the eyeballs that are, like, real. That's how the human brain works. Everything we see is an interpretation of things, as opposed to the enemies seeing the player with Octo Camo, where it's just a number, and it's like, does the enemy see you, yes or no? They can't make any decisions about what they see, because they're not people. They're code that says yes or no. But they might be more complicated than that, but I wouldn't know, because it didn't happen to me in my game. I was invisible for most of it. And then in terms of the story, so I alluded to it in the MGS2 section, but MGS4 is the breaking point of Metal Gear Solid's grand plot. Because Metal Gear Solid 4, in the words of Steak Bentley, who made a fantastic video about how Metal Gear Solid 4 was a mistake, in the words of Steak Bentley, Metal Gear Solid 4 is the follow-up to a game that's impossible to follow up. Because, again, for as much as I complain about MGS2's story, the ending, all the interesting and good stuff is backloaded at the end of the game. And in terms of all these things that are backloaded at the end of the game, one of those things is the ambiguous ending. What does it all mean? Why is it that fucking 9/11, for all intents and purposes, just happened in the Metal Gear Solid universe, and no one cares? How is it that no one's, like, paying attention to Snake or Raiden, two soldiers standing around talking to each other, and this, like, again, it's New York, and being a New York resident myself, I don't know if I would really think about it that much if I just saw a guy in a, like, not swimming suit, what's it called? Like, all-terrain suit? Whatever it's called, but whatever the suit that they wear is called. If I saw that, I don't know if I'd pay that much attention to it. But still, 9/11 just happened, and so I feel like seeing soldiers out in the middle of the city might draw a little bit more attention in that situation. Who knows? Vamp is also just, like, there. Why? It's all supposed to be weird. And Rose, at what point in the game does Rose become fake? Because obviously the Rose you're talking to at the very end of the game is fake. That's, like, you know, clearly established during the very, very, very long cutscene before the final boss, and then even during the final boss. But Rose is obviously a real person who existed, you know, because the AI version that talks to you is obviously not the real version you talk to, because, you know, she wouldn't have existed. They wouldn't have known each other physically. And so, who was the real Rose? Was she actually, like, a person who did all these things? Was she actually a spy? Did she actually, get here at the end of the game? Or is Jack just imagining these things? Or is he still in a simulation? Who knows? These things are supposed to be ambiguous because it's supposed to be about the portrayal of information to not just the characters, but also the player. What is the player supposed to know? And what's the player supposed to know, and what's the player supposed to think that they know? And then Metal Gear Solid 4 goes, remember all that bullshit? Yeah, it's actually fake and not real. All of it, yeah, Rose actually was a real person. The AI, yeah, it just fucked off at some point and started doing its own things with PMCs. Jack, he actually broke up with Rose, even though he found out that she was real, and and that the AI fabricated all that shit, and it was factually a lie. And then he broke up with Rose and started doing his own cyborg ninja shit because he became a cyborg ninja for some reason, even though Metal Gear Solid 2 seems to clearly establish that Jack is a really skilled swordsman without being a cyborg ninja, because he fought essentially a cyborg at the end of that game and beat him. He fucking killed him. But I guess he's a cyborg ninja now because we need a cyborg ninja back because it's Metal Gear Solid 4, and if there's anything that Metal Gear Solid 4 does well, it's call back to Metal Gear Solids 1 and 2 because and 3. It's callback. Metal Gear Solid 4 is just a game full of callbacks and not a lot of substance. Because, my god, guess what else we're gonna ruin from the rest of the series? Yeah, you know how the ending of Metal Gear Solid 1 is also technically ambiguous because you're able to save either, you're able to either save Meryl or let her die if you gave in to the torture, and, you know, whether or not Meryl's even alive at the end of the game is supposed to be ambiguous. Turns out, actually, no, fuck that. The canon ending is the one where you save Meryl. And then apparently her and Snake just fell out at some point because they stopped talking for God knows how long until Metal Gear Solid 4 comes around. And Snake's now an old guy and Meryl doesn't want to fuck him anymore. And now the Colonel is fucking Rose also, to go back to the Jack stuff. Metal Gear Solid 4, just in general, ruins a lot about Raiden's story that I don't like. Because Raiden's one of the characters I actually like a lot in Metal Gear Solid. I don't know if I would call him my favorite, but he's probably like top 5. There's Ocelot, there's Naked Snake, there's the Solid Snake, there's Liquid, and yeah, probably Raiden. I can't think of anyone else who'd be above him. Maybe, nah, I like Fat Man ironically. I can't say he's a better character than Raiden, I like him more. But yeah, in terms of writing, I like Raiden more than most of the characters in the franchise, and so it really annoys me that it seems like the priority with him was just to make his life shitty and bad and imply that everything went wrong after MGS2, even though the fucking point at the end of that game was you have to find out where things go wrong. Whatever, I don't care. I do care, but I don't care. I try not to care, but I care a lot. And that's the problem, isn't it? Is that Metal Gear Solid 4, it takes all of your care and it shits on it. Because Metal Gear Solid 4 is a bad story. Again, this is supposed to be the shortened version. I don't know why I'm still going. Watch my video. Go and watch the Steak Bentley video. Fucking, if you want to make your own opinions about Metal Gear Solid 4 and then argue with me, then you can do that. Which a lot of people did in the comments of my Metal Gear Solid video. A lot of people were like, no, Metal Gear Solid 4 is actually really good. And no, you're all stupid. You're all stupid and I hate you and you're wrong. I hate you like as a person, fundamentally, as a human being. I hate you because of your opinions on Metal Gear Solid 4. So, you know. So, Metal Gear Solid 5, you know, what's that about? So, Metal Gear Solid 5 is weirdly split into 2 games, Ground Zeroes and The Phantom Pain, and I think that Ground Zeroes is technically the better game, but that's just because Ground Zeroes is a more refined experience. You know, it's, you go in, these are your objectives, these are the ways you can improve your score, go nuts, king. And, you know, Metal Gear Solid 5, as a complete whole, is very different from other Metal Gear Solid games, because it's not just one continuous story you go through. It's open world, and there are missions, and it's a bunch of fucking bullshit from Peace Walker. Let's not even talk about Mother Base. Let's just not. And I think Ground Zeroes makes pretty good use of it, because in Ground Zeroes, it really is just a score attack. Go in to the mission, here's your setting, here's your objectives, here's your gear, go nuts. And I think that if the entirety of 5 was structured that way, it would be a better experience. I can't say it would be a good one, because Peace Walker was also framed that way, and Peace Walker sucked, but that was also because it was kind of just MGS light. So I can't say for sure whether or not a full Ground Zeroes kind of game would have been the best, but like I said, Ground Zeroes is just a more refined experience than 5 proper. The Phantom Pain, I should say. And the way 5 pans out, where it's an open world game, kind of, it's really just kind of disappointing, because it's a lot of open world bullshit in a series that did not need open world bullshit. And I'll admit, I'm a little bit biased because I don't like open world games, but even then, it's not really an open world. It has an open world, yeah, but the most that you do in the game is, like, go to bases and then take out guys and stuff like that. And you still have, like, objectives and stuff, it's just a more open area to complete those objectives. And MGS5 makes a lot of improvements, like controls, wise that make it a really fun game to play, but it's again, it's a Metal Gear Solid 2 problem, where it just doesn't feel like the game is structured in a way that can really take advantage of that most of the time, because most of the time you end up doing either the very same things. Like, the game has fucking billions of different distraction tools for you to use, from decoys to sound makers to, like, electric mines people, like, walk up to and get shocked by. There are so many ways for you to make distractions in MGS5, so it's a damn shame that, for the most part, you can kind of just throw a magazine, of which you have an infinite amount of, and then get a guard to look in a different direction so you can choke them out. It's again, there's so much that they improve on. 5 is very much a 3 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of game. For everything that they improve, there's a few things where it's like, why did they do this? I would talk about the story, but there isn't one. It's called Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Plot for a reason. The Metal Gear Solid 5 just doesn't have a story, really. It has a plot. No. Okay, you know what? Here's the distinction, because I hear a lot of people use these words differently a lot. Metal Gear Solid 5 has a plot, but it doesn't really have a narrative. Metal Gear Solid 5 has overarching things that happen. You have to go to OKB-0 to take out Zero. Or not Zero, what's his face? Skullface. You have to go to Sahelanthropus's base and do whatever it is you have to save Huey for. All the things you have to do in MGS5 have points in the plot that you need to do them for, but what's the narrative of the game? What takes you from point A to point B to point C, and so on and so forth? Because a lot of it is really nothing. The game wants you to just do a lot of bullshit in between the actual story missions, because even the actual story missions aren't really counted as part of the main story. There's like 50 of them throughout the game, but only 10 or so actually matter to anything. There are some where you have to go and get like a plot relevant item, like the honeybee or whatever, but that's like 6 missions into the game, and even then, the only thing that happens there is you show up, you get the honeybee, Skullface shows up and goes, damn, that's crazy, and then you leave with the honeybee after fighting a few skulls. A plot element that you already know about from the very first mission in the game, or, well, basically the very first. And then, you know, even by the end of the game, when you get to the end of the video game, what's supposed to be the end of the narrative, it's just the truth mission, which is just the first mission, but a few of the cutscenes are different. And even then, I couldn't tell you which ones aside from the very last one. And so, to reiterate, Metal Gear Solid 5, it definitely has an overarching narrative. There are things that happen in the game that affect the story of the Metal Gear Solid franchise at large, but the narrative is, Venom Snake wants to get revenge on Skullface for fucking up Mother Base and all that, and then he does it. And then Mother Base continues as it does until the events of Metal Gear. That's kind of it. Like many things, I am very willing to be wrong on this, and if someone wants to, like, argue with me in the comments about Metal Gear Solid 5 actually does have a narrative, then, like, go off. I will listen and probably respond. I don't even know about probably. I definitely will respond. It's not like I have, you know, a billion comments to respond to on these videos, but, you know, shit, if you have, like, Discord or something, I'll give you my Discord, just so we can argue in person, or not in person, but, like, you know, in real time, because I am willing to be wrong about these things. Or you can go to my streams, because I do plan on streaming all of Metal Gear Solid 5, so you can do that too. But yeah, it's just weird to me, because I see a lot of, like, very standard praise for MGS5 as a game, but whenever people talk about the story, everyone knows it as the Phantom Plot, but I feel like a lot of people are missing why it's the Phantom Plot, aside from just the game wasn't finished. And, like, you know, to address all of that bullshit with the game, yeah, I know the game isn't finished, but as far as I'm concerned, that's not really my responsibility. I'm the player of the game. I get whatever was handed to me by the developers, and if the developers didn't finish for whatever reason, be it Kojima going over budget, or Konami stifling whatever Kojima was trying to do with the game because they wanted to do more pachinko machines or whatever, it doesn't really matter, because the game that we have is the Phantom Plot, and so I don't really care if it's, if the game wasn't finished, and if the fucking Land of the Flies or whatever, the very not subtle Lord of the Flies reference, I don't care if that was supposed to be the real ending to the game, because the fact of the matter is that it isn't. It isn't the real ending to the game, and it doesn't make a lot of sense why Liquid would hate, Big Boss so much, when Liquid's entire time with Big Boss was sitting in a room until one day he took over Sahelanthropus, and then until another day he just left with Sahelanthropus and Psycho Mantis. If Metal Gear Solid 5 not being finished ends up negatively reflecting on the game's, on the whole series' plot as a whole, that's unfortunate, but that's not really my fault. I just call it like it is. Not like Metal Gear Solid 5 has more detrimental effects in the series than 4 does, which I didn't even talk about this when going over 4's story, but what the fuck is up with the hell with the goddamn nanomachines? Like, oh yeah, all the superpowers in the series, they weren't really superpowers, they were actually just nanomachines the whole time, except for the times where they literally were superpowers, because that was the entire thing that happened at the end of MGS2 with Fortune, is that we thought she was using nanomachines because Ocelot turns them off, but no, she actually just had superpowers, except when MGS4 comes around and says, no, they weren't. So is Ocelot just a liar? Whatever, we're not talking about MGS4 anymore. We're done with MGS4. We're done with MGS. That was the last one. MGS5 is the last one. Go watch my video. What's next? Ace Attorney. I also played Ace Attorney, which is another video that I have, but my Ace Attorney video isn't about the whole franchise, it's just about the Apollo Justice trilogy, which isn't what I call it, but we'll get there. I guess if you want to be technical about it, Ace Attorney isn't really a series that I've been looking at for years and I finally got into, along with the rest of the series that I did. It's more like I started Ace Attorney 1 way back in like 2019 whenever I got my hands in the trilogy, and then I didn't finish it for a really long time because Rise from the Ashes is a really long case. And then when I finally did get back to it, I was like, wow, that's great, time to play the next game. And then I didn't do that for, I want to say 2 years? Because when I beat Rise from the Ashes, it wasn't COVID yet. And then when I finally started Ace Attorney 2, I was in my first year of college. So, yeah, I think it might have been like 3 years in between me playing Ace Attorneys 1 and 2. But regardless of how long it took me to do it, Ace Attorney as a franchise was still something that I wanted to get into as a whole. And so, then I finally played 2, and I was really in for like, you know, another great game. Because Ace Attorney 1, it's weirdly really good for a first game. Because there are a lot of series that have first game in the series syndrome, where you see all the elements of the things that would become good for later games, but, you know, as a first game, either because it came out on old hardware, or because they were just trying something new and they didn't know exactly how they were going to flesh it all out. You know, there's a lot of growing pains with the first game in the series. But with Ace Attorney, the first game in that series is like the second best one in the entire franchise. And you can argue that might have made my expectations for 2 a little bit high, but considering that 2 among the fanbase isn't considered a very good game anyway, I don't think that I was very inaccurate in my assessment of 2. Especially since I'm willing to be fair to it, you know, whenever 2 is good, because the last case of 2 is like the second best case in the entire franchise. Whenever 2 is good, it's just good. I can't really complain about that. The problem is just that most of 2 isn't good. And you know, luckily for my recording sessions, Ace Attorney is a very story-based series, so I'm not going to get to talk about, like, most of what the games are, and I can just sort of breeze past them really quick, because we're already up to Ace Attorney 3, which is the best game in the franchise. For a long time, I wrestled with whether or not it was 3 or 1, because like I said, 1 is, like, really fucking good. But ultimately, I came down to saying that 3 is better, because the real point of contention is that 3 has one bad case, which is Turnabout Sisters, the sort of mini case in between the very finale one and the one right before it, that's obviously how in between works. Okay, but the very last case of the game is one of, if not the best in the entire franchise. The second case of the game is one of the best in the franchise. The third case in the game isn't, like, you know, one of the best in the franchise, but it's still really fucking good. Sure, the first case is kind of middling, but that's kind of how it is for all of the games. They're supposed to be really simple and easy. So, yeah, I can't really come down to that. And just, 1 was way more consistent than 3. 1 does not have a bad case in it. And so when I was thinking about it, I was like, which surpasses the other? 3 for its high highs and low lows, or 1 for its consistent highs. And even at some point in the future, I might change my mind and say that 1's actually the better game. But as it stands, I'm gonna say that 3 is the better one, because while consistent highs might sound better, I don't think that really puts into perspective just how high 3's highs are. Because if I were to name the top 3 cases in all of Ace Attorney, 2 of them would be from 3, and the last one would be from 2, because Rise from the Ashes and the 4th case in Ace Attorney 1 are really good, but I can't say, they're probably the 4th and 5th best cases, but if that top 3 just is devoid of 1's content, then I think that really does just put 3 a step above 1, even with its lows. But then luckily, I didn't have to worry about any of this contention about which games are better than which ones with the next games that came out, because the Apollo Justice trilogy kinda sucks. And to be fair, that's very unfair to Ace Attorney 4, because by itself, Apollo Justice Ace Attorney is a decent game. It's better than 2, just barely, because, like I said, two has one of the best final cases in the entire franchise, but that final case is carrying the entire rest of the game on its back. So when 4 comes around and it has 2 generally good cases and then 1 okay case and 1 bad one, I think, you know, compared to 2's 1 bad one and then 2 middling ones and a really good one, I think that just barely puts 4 over 2. Though again, it's a conversation of high highs and low lows. But I can't say Apollo Justice was uninteresting. The cases themselves might not have been, like, fantastic, but Apollo Justice himself is a very interesting character and is my favorite character in the entire Ace Attorney franchise, and the entire concept of where does the Ace Attorney universe go now that now that Phoenix isn't the main character, is an interesting one. And, you know, it's very much a case of growing pains. Not every series knocks it out of the park instantly when they introduce a new protagonist. DMC did it well, and, you know, they got lucky. Or not they got lucky, but, like, it's hard to do. So DMC did it well because they managed to do it well. Metal Gear Solid technically does it well, though a lot of people don't really think about that aspect. Whatever. Tekken did it fantastically, and I think that that's the minority. And even then, some people might not agree about anything after 3 being that fantastic of a protagonist inheritance role, but that's besides the point. The point is that they tried to stick the landing with Apollo, and it was a little bit wobbly, but they can always recover from that. But then, something horrible, awful happened. Ace Attorney 5 came out. And I guess Shun Takumi also left the company. Now we're getting to the things that I actually talked about in my video, but Ace Attorney 5, it just fucking sucks. The characters are not good, and Apollo gets all his screen time taken, and the cases aren't good, and the overarching narrative is not good because they keep trying to retcon things for Apollo's backstory. It's all just a huge mess. And I'm not saying that I can't talk about spoilers on this whole thing. What I am saying is that this is for people who know what I'm talking about and either agree or disagree, or people who are interested and will want to play these games, you know, if I talked about them. So I don't need to get into the nitty-gritties of it. Again, my video goes over that without huge spoilers, so if you want to do that, then you can. But to make a long story short, Ace Attorney 5 is when the series becomes bad. 2 is disappointing, sure. 4 was not that great, sure. But 5 is the first bad game in the series, and that's just not awesome. This is very disheartening. But luckily, things were turning around, because something that wasn't as bad happened. They just made the same game again. And that's not to say that Spirit of Justice is the exact same as Ace Attorney 5. Spirit of Justice is a little bit better, but emphasis on a little bit, because for the most part, 6 is also just a bad Ace Attorney game. Again, Apollo gets all his screen time taken from him, and it's especially disappointing when the 4th case in the game is a completely unrelated to literally anything Athena case, where there isn't even an investigation segment. You just sort of walk in and Athena's doing a case with Blackwell now, and it's just all a bunch of bullshit. And it's wasting my time, and it's taking time away from the best guy, Apollo, and the best guy, Phoenix. Because again, the game is supposed to have an overarching narrative about the both of them, which is why they should have called that game Dual Destinies, but I digress. It's just so much, and then they added more to Apollo's backstory because he didn't have enough of it before, and I promise the more backstory we add, the better a character he'll be, even though he's already a good character and they don't need to... Okay, the point that I'm trying to make is that Ace Attorney has lost its way, and I don't know if an Ace Attorney 7 could be any good. I want it to be good. I want it to exist, first of all, if it's ever even gonna come in the first place. But even beyond it existing, I want it to be good, but I don't know if it will be, because I don't know if Apollo will be in it. And even if he is in it, I can't promise that he's gonna get what he deserves, which is a good story. So here I am, waiting. Thanks, Ace Attorney. I guess better luck next time. Which is what they almost did when The Great Ace Attorney came out. And people generally had this perception that The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, that being the duology of the games, are either the best games in the franchise or very close to it. And that astonishes me, because I think that both of those games suck dick. And I'm not just talking, like, disappointing, like 2 or 4 suck dick. No, I mean those games, like, suck dick. Like, not even like 5 or 6. Because again, 5 and 6, they are the bad Ace Attorney games, but even among bad things, there can be good things in them. And so when I look at Ace Attorneys 5 and 6, yeah, generally they're bad, But, you know, Athena is an interesting character. I just wish she didn't have so much screen time. The gameplay mechanics introduced in 6 are very, very interesting. I just wish they got used more. But then the Great Ace Attorney comes along, and it's just bad. It's as basic as, like, the first games in the series, but they have writing that's like 10 times worse. I guess to get positives out of the way first, the only really good thing about the Great Ace Attorney games is that they are fucking beautiful. Their presentation is like out of this goddamn world. I don't know, okay, so the remasters that came out for like PCs and consoles in 2021, I believe that those are just like upscales of the games. I don't think that they actually changed anything about the models or anything like that, because you can even notice that they're still like pretty angular in some places. So I think they are just the 3DS models but upscaled. But that's a problem for Ace Attorney 6, because I didn't mention it before, but when Ace Attorney went 3D with 5, it looked ugly. It was just not a very good looking game, and then 6 improved on it in some places, but it still just didn't really look that good and was inferior compared to both the pixel art and the 2D art from the original games and the remasters. But in Japan, the Great Ace Attorney came out in between 5 and 6, so why does it look like 15,000 times better than both of those games? Not only are the animations and the art direction themselves better, but even just the way they present the 3D models is better. In the Great Ace Attorney, when two characters are talking to each other that aren't, you know, a character talking to you, the main character, they will like show both models on screen and have them turn to each other to talk to each other, as opposed to what 5 and 6 do, which is just to have both models standing there staring at you, the player, even though they're not talking to you, the player. And just in so many presentation aspects, the Great Ace Attorney is a very far cry from the other games, and I like it for that. But beyond that, the rest of it just sucks. And it annoys me, right? Because when I played the Great Ace Attorney 1, I played it and I said, man, that game kinda sucked. And I talked about that in my Ace Attorney video, at least I mentioned it, you know, very briefly. And people in the comments, they got mad at me. They were like, oh, what are you talking about? The Great Ace Attorney, it's really good, actually. You're wrong. Just wait till you play the second game. It's all gonna come full circle, bro. And then I played the second game, and it was also bad, and it didn't bring things full circle. If anything, it made the games worse, actually, in a few aspects. Because you get to the second case in the Great Ace Attorney 2, and it's like, oh yeah, this is a secret case that we did that we just never talked about. And it's like, not only do you never talk about it, you never mentioned it. And I know that within the game, the reason they never mentioned it was because, you know, Herlock told us not to mention this case to anybody, never to bring it up again. But that was, like, to other people who don't know about the case, even though the case itself wasn't a secret, because it had a very public trial. Obviously, the part Herlock told you not to talk about was what happened after the case was over, the thing you found, you know, the crown and whatnot. But mysteriously, throughout the entire first game, nothing ever gets mentioned about that second case in the second game, even though chronologically, it already happened. What's that about? I don't know. Is it that it wasn't created yet? I don't know. I genuinely cannot answer that question, because in a lot of ways, it very much feels like both Great Ace Attorney games were made to be, like, you know, a combined thing. There are things in the first game that do not even kind of see any sort of resolution until the second game. And so when you play it, it feels like, oh, they're setting these things up for the second game that we just haven't seen yet. But then there are things in the second game that make it feel like it was done on a whim, like they didn't plan anything. And so it really makes you wonder what parts of these games were planned and which parts of these games were just sort of vaguely implied to be a different thing. So that was just my bone to pick with everyone who told me to play the second game and it would get better, because they were wrong. But then even beyond that, there are just things in both games' stories that, you know, are not very satisfying. Like in the first game, one thing that really pisses me off is how basically all the cases lack some sort of conclusion. There's no resolution, satisfaction. What's the word for, like, satisfaction in a thing ending? Payoff? Something like that. But whatever that word is, there's none of that in Ace Attorney, in the Great Ace Attorney, because in the very first case of the game, the actual villain gets away scot-free. And it's like, oh, okay, that's one of the things that they set up for the second game, but, you know, it makes the first game have no satisfaction towards the end of the first case. And then the second case also has no satisfaction because there's no culprit. The entire situation was caused by an accident. And so instead of that payoff that every single other Ace Attorney game is known for, where you go, alright, now here's a resolution to this entire whole narrative, you go, oh, that's kind of unfortunate, and everyone fucks off. And then in the third case, there's still no resolution, because again, the person that you're defending just sort of gets away with it, even though they did the thing, and it's like, well, that's unfortunate. And then everyone fucks off, nothing ever, like, no, not to say nothing ever comes from it, because things do come from it in the second game, but again, it makes the first game lack any, conclusion. And then in the fourth case, they do the thing from the second case again, where there is no culprit, it was all just an accident, and also no one died. So who even cares about anything that's going on? It's like, oh, well, that's unfortunate. Anyway, and then everyone fucks off. The only case with any resolution is in the very last case, where there's an actual, like, thing going on. But even then, once the actual case is over, all you get is more setup for the second game. And then the second game proceeds to pay very few, if any, of these things off. The first case almost resolves the first case of the first game by just sort of having the events be related to it, but you don't get the actual payoff for what any of that means until the end of the game. The second case, again, chronologically goes back and back and back, which just gives you more different things to worry about, which, again, doesn't really resolve anything that actually came from the first game, aside from a character showing up that just doesn't show up again until the second game. But, again, there's no conclusion, there's no payoff, and so 2 cases into the second game, you're still just not being given anything. And then by the third case, that's when you actually start to get into the meat, but that's just more of 2's original stuff and not things that were followed up on from 1. The fourth case is where things finally come around to a character that you met before. Actually, I might have gotten the third and fourth cases switched around, but honestly it doesn't matter. The point being, one of them follows up on the fourth case from the last game, and it's just more of the same bullshit, because different bullshit happens, and it's just more things that happen from after the events of the fourth case in the last game. These aren't, like, actually meaningful follow-ups from the things that weren't paid off from that game. It's only until the fifth case of the second game that everything finally comes full circle, and even then, none of it fucking matters because it's all just different bullshit from what you cared about in the first place. It's all just, oh yeah, this is what it was actually about. It's not like an actual satisfying ending to these things, bringing together all of your knowledge of the entire duology. It's just them reintroducing the information so you can do a new case and then say that the plot follows up from those things, when in reality, they kinda don't. But that's a whole situation, and if you want to talk more about it, we can. But for now, I'm just gonna leave it at that. So yeah, story-wise, The Great Ace Attorney sucked, and everyone who told me that it wasn't gonna suck lied to me. And then even beyond the story, like I said before, there's not really like gameplay stuff to talk about, except that's actually the problem with your Ace Attorney. I'm not a huge fan of visual novels, but the Ace Attorney series has been, like, an exception to the rule, because while they are still very much visual novels, they pretend to have gameplay. They have puzzles and things that you can figure out, even if they are very linear and the answers can be found by guessing. And honestly, I was fine with that for the most part. Again, Ace Attorney had good stories, and so I tolerated them even though they weren't very, gameplay focused. Unfortunately, things changed with The Great Ace Attorney, because The Great Ace Attorney, both games are far, far longer than any Ace Attorney game before them. Both games total up to like 30-ish hours, and that's just, it's an insane amount, but it's not an insane amount because there's more to the game, it's an insane amount because they waste your fucking time. There is so much talking about bullshit that just does not need to be said. I can't count on my hands the number of times where someone would bring something up in the middle of a case, and then either the main character or the assistant character would go, that's that thing we saw earlier, isn't it? And it's like, yes, I know it's the thing we saw earlier, that was like 10 minutes ago gameplay-wise, so stop bringing it up, I already know that it already happened. Whatever, you understand, you get the point that I'm making. But beyond that, they also waste your time with the gameplay, because there's one thing that The Great Ace Attorney introduced that was supposed to be some new element to the investigation segments, but that really wasn't, which is Herlock's deductions, which are a cutscene that you have to watch in full, and then you have to repeat a watch in full, but with more dialogue and pointing out the easiest things to ever point out in the history of anything. And the thing that annoys me the most about them, aside from how much time they waste, is that they could have been fun, because at the very last case, in the very last Herlock, investigation segment of the entire franchise, they do a thing with that investigation that involves more gameplay than just pointing at a thing and going there. But they didn't do that for any other case in the entire fucking duology, so it's a waste of potential. It could have been really fun, but they don't use it for anything, and the one time they do use it, it's at the end of the fucking franchise. So gameplay-wise, The Great Ace Attorney didn't live up to anything that it set up either. That's just the story of its life, isn't it? Setting up a lot of things that it does not pay off on, and ends up being a really shitty and unsatisfying experience in general. And I haven't played the investigation games. I'll probably play them at some point now that they've been re-released. but they're not important for this video that I'm doing right now because I didn't have the chance to play them before I recorded this. But assuming I continue to do this weekly, I'll probably end up talking about them whenever I end up playing them, so look forward to that, I guess. And in talking about Ace Attorney, I actually remembered one series that I completed in the time it took me to start up this idea for these videos, that I completed the entire series in the time it took for me to get from conceptualization, not conception, that's a different thing, but from conceptualization to now, I beat the entire series, is Danganronpa, which is another visual novel series in the same kind of vein as Ace Attorney. And Danganronpa is something that I don't want to spoil far more so than Ace Attorney, because I actually don't have any complaints about Danganronpa. The stories of all 3 games, and yes, there are only 3 games, there is not a 4th one that has a completely different gameplay style, wouldn't know about it, but the story of all 3 games is really good, and I don't want to spoil that for anybody. The TLDR is really just that the gameplay of Danganronpa is really fun, because, surprise surprise, if visual novels actually can have gameplay, Ace Attorney was just skipping out on me, I guess, for all those years. And the stories are fucking fantastic. Like, after playing Danganronpa, I had to lower my scores for every single Ace Attorney game, because I'd given 1 and 3 9s, but I had to drop them to 8s, because I gave the Danganronpa games 10s and 9, and then 1 9, that was for Danganronpa 2, and I realized that I can't even begin to compare these games. If I even thought about putting Ace Attorney, even the best Ace Attorney, in the same breath as the worst Danganronpa game, the worst real Danganronpa game, there was such a gap of difference. There's such a difference between the two in quality that I couldn't put them on the same score and feel any way right about it. So I had to retcon all of my Ace Attorney scores, because Danganronpa was just that good and showed me what visual novels can do when they try. Which, again, the good Ace Attorney games, they do try, but mostly writing-wise. Gameplay-wise, they're nothing. And when they try to be something, they're still nothing. So thanks, Danganronpa, for being a really fun and awesome series to play, but fuck you, Danganronpa, for making me think worse about the games that I already liked. But I guess that's just how it happens sometimes. You experience more things in life and you realize the things you experienced before might not have been as good as you had previously imagined them to be. And now, finally, Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts, you magnificent, interesting series, you. This Kingdom Hearts is the very first series that I had, like, actively set out to get into when I finally got a computer. Because, there were a few. There was Dragon Quest, there was Metal Gear Solid, which you obviously know now, and the one I ended up choosing was Kingdom Hearts, because I had a friend who was into it, and there were people who I knew who were into it, and I figured, you know what, might as well. And Kingdom Hearts 1, very much in the same way that Ace Attorney surprised me in how good it was. Looking back, it might not have been as good as I originally thought. Like, when I first played the game, I gave it an 8, but nowadays I think I give it more of a 7, but it was still a 7 for the first game in an action RPG series that would go on to have many, many games worse than a 7, is actually pretty good. And so, I mean, congrats to Kingdom Hearts 1 for being as good as it was. And I plan on eventually making a video about Kingdom Hearts, at least Kingdom Hearts 3, I don't know about the entire franchise, but in terms of Kingdom Hearts 1, I don't even know if there's really that much to say, aside from it was a really good action RPG. I think that if there's anything I wanted to point out about it now, it's that 100%ing it is a fucking nightmare, because getting all the synthesis materials that you need to get to make Ultima is a nightmare, to put it simply. And playing the game on Final Mix Proud is not a very fun experience, because unlike the later Final Mix, okay, I was gonna say versions, plural, of Kingdom Hearts, but then I remembered that the only good Final Mix that exists after Kingdom Hearts 1 is Kingdom Hearts 2, because 3 doesn't really have a Final Mix, and 3's critical mode isn't really all that good. So, there's only the one. There's only the one Final Mix. So, unlike the one Final Mix that would come after Kingdom Hearts 1 and actually be good, Final Mix Proud is not very well tuned for the game. You don't get any bonuses that will make playing the game compensate for your lower health pool and the higher damage that enemies do. Enemies just sort of do more damage, and you're going to spend a lot of the game getting one-shot. So unless you're planning on 100%ing the game, which, again, I don't recommend anyway, I can't really recommend someone playing on the hardest difficulty for Kingdom Hearts 1, because it's just not very well made. You're going to have the best experience playing on the normal one, which is how it goes for most games, but still. I guess it's not just that the enemies are overtuned, by the way, it's also that Kingdom Hearts 1's combat is not very in-depth. You mostly just sort of swing the Keyblade in your 3-hit combo and then use magic a lot. which originally I liked. The very first time I played Kingdom Hearts 1, I fucking loved that it was so magic focused despite being an action RPG. And to the point where when I started 2, and it was way more melee combat focused than magic, I did not like 2 as much as 1 at first, which is a crazy opinion that I have now, but we'll get there. And yeah, a lot of 1's combat is just sort of awkwardly flailing around with the Keyblade, and it's just not very robust enough to actually get you out of dangerous situations consistently. So even beyond Proud mode, it's just not like... The combat itself isn't that deep. It's an action RPG where you kind of just wail on guys and use magic a lot. And on normal, that might be a little bit more tolerable, but on Proud, it was a fucking hellhole. But even playing Final Mix Proud was not... Even 100%ing Final Mix Proud was nowhere near as awful as an experience as playing Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories. And you might hear from some Kingdom Hearts fans that Chain of Memories is actually really good. That's secretly, even though the gameplay is very different from the rest of the series, that what it was still good. And those people are lying to you. They will scam you and take your credit cards and, you know, pay for mortgages that you were not supposed to be paying for. Because Chain of Memories, it just doesn't work at all. And I'm not saying this about Chain of Memories because the gameplay is different. No. I don't... The problem isn't that it's different. The problem is that it's bad. And to make a long story short about Chain of Memories' bad gameplay, is that it has this card system where you need to play cards with higher numbers than your opponents to be able to actually use the card. Because if you try to play a card with a lower number, it just won't activate. And there's only 3 ways to play Chain of Memories. There's the first way, which is to wait for the enemy to play a card and then play a higher number card than them. But that's going to result in every battle taking fucking forever, because enemies take an inconsistent amount of time to use cards, so you're actually going to be spending like 2 to 3 minutes on every single battle in the game, because you'll be waiting for the enemies to use a card, and then once they use a card, you'll only get to use the one, because again, you know, you're trying to go for the one that has a higher number, you can't use any more than that. Well, you can, but it's not going to be a good idea. And so, you're going to be doing chip damage to these people every 10-15 seconds, and it just won't be very fun for anybody. And then there's the second way to play the game, which is to spam slights. And this is also not going to result in a very fun way to play the game, because once you unlock slights like Sonic Blade in the original, or Lethal Frame in Recom, you're just gonna use those over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until the game ends. And that's kind of just it. You use Sonic Blade and you go back and forth over and over again, and there won't be any like gameplay to be heard of, because that was it. That was the entire game. Slights can't be broken by normal enemies, so you're just going to use that to room clear every time. And then on bosses, they're more often than not going to have higher numbers than you, so they're just not going to be able to act on you either. And even if they do have higher numbers than you can always just use the slight again, and what are they going to do about it? You have zeros. Which brings us to the third way to play the game, which is to try to almost treat it like a normal Kingdom Hearts game, and use Keyblade combos like they're Keyblade combos, and magic like it's magic, and healing like it's healing, and so on and so forth. But the problem with that is that you're constantly going to get your cards broken by enemies using their cards in the middle of your strings. Because the way a 3-hit combo works in Chain of Memories is that you don't just use a Keyblade card and then swing that 3 times. No, you have to use 3 Keyblade cards, and those 3 Keyblade cards might have different numbers. And so what's going to end up happening is that you're going to swing your first card, which is a 7, swing your second card, which is a 6, and then when you're going to swing your third card, which is a 5, some random fuck-off enemy will pull out a 6 card, and then, whoops, can't use your Keyblade combo no more. You just got interrupted, you just wasted the cards, and you have to go back and recharge your entire deck so that you can be able to fight again. And you're just going to do that over and over and over and over again, and constantly fight with the game to actually be able to use the cards that you set up, even though you can't see what the enemy's cards are, and they'll pull out random things at random times to interrupt you. And it's a whole process, and it's just not a very fun way to play the game. And so what we've ended up with are 3 different ways to play the game, and 3 different ways to play the game that all suck. And so Chain of Memories just isn't very good. I've heard word that the Riku half of the game is better, because you don't set up your own deck in that, and Riku has like a transformation mechanic that's just more fun, and a duel mechanic that's more fun. But I wouldn't know, because I got to the final like card uploading door in Chain of Memories, which that's something else you have to do in that game. It's too much, and I needed a specific either number of cards or a specific kind of card to be able to, you know, surpass the door. And I didn't have that card, which meant that I was going to have to go do some enemy grinding to hopefully get a chance at getting that card. And then I thought about it to myself, and I said I would rather kill myself than do any Chain of Memories combat beyond what I literally have to. And so I stopped playing the game. And that was the original Game Boy Advance version of Chain of Memories, which everyone says is the better game. I don't believe them, but they say that's the better game. And I still fucking hated it. So, what now, Kingdom Hearts fans? Are you just gonna be wrong forever and be stupid? Oh, yeah, story. I guess I forgot to talk about that. I mean, Kingdom Hearts 1's story is, like, alright, you know? It's pretty standard. Oh yeah, the gummy ship. The gummy ship sucks. There's not much more to say about it. It's a rail shooter segment that is not anywhere near as good as any rail shooter you've probably ever played. So, there you go. Oh, yeah, story. Kingdom Hearts 1 had a pretty standard story, but if I wanted to get into everything that encompassed Kingdom Hearts' story, then we'd have to get into a lot more than just Kingdom Hearts 1's story, and so I'll probably end up talking about that when I get to later games, when the actual problems start coming up, which is actually going to happen as early as Kingdom Hearts 2, to an extent. But, I guess to make a long story short, well, not the long story, but, you know, to make a long story short for now, Chain of Memories also has a pretty standard story. There are things I like about it, but for the most part, it's just kind of whatever. Nothing to complain about, at least not yet, but again, that'll come with later Kingdom Hearts stuff. But for now, we get to talk about Kingdom Hearts 2. And an interesting thing about my experience with Kingdom Hearts 2 is that it was actually technically the first Kingdom Hearts game I played, because way back when I was deciding which series I wanted to get into first, I actually downloaded the real-ass Japanese version of Final Mix, because I didn't know about any of the, 2.5 collections or any of that. And I played through a fair bit of the opening, and I found it really interesting from the nothing of it that I could understand, because I hadn't learned Japanese yet, and I didn't feel like modding the PS2 version on my very legal PS2, so. But little did I know, I was actually right to find it interesting, because the opening of KH2 is like one of the best openings to any video game story I've ever played. For one, it gives you like all the context you need for the actual like game. Just because you don't spend the entire thing doing combat doesn't mean you aren't learning how to play the game. You're learning how to move around the world, which doesn't matter that much in KH2's world compared to like KH1, but it's still something that just gets you used to moving around in a game, which isn't going to be something that you're going to have universal knowledge of for every game, especially when they have sort of strange physics like Kingdom Hearts. And then even among the combat, you do get, glimmers of it every now and then, but it's also put within the context of the story, which is really fucking good. I don't know what the trope is called, but any story where it's like, the character, they're put in a simulation and it's like a fake life and like everything's crumbling around them or whatever. I think it also happened in, this is going to be really way out of left field, but the third Fairly Odd Parents movie, where Timmy was like the chosen one or something, and he was living a surrogate life or something. It's, whatever that trope is called. I fucking love that in media. And Kingdom Hearts 2 does it like perfectly. And then when you finally get to the end of it, and Roxas says, I guess my summer vacation is over, and then you get the fucking title screen, it's so good. Kingdom Hearts 2 is a fantastic game, and the opening, it prepares you for every bit of the story goodness you're about to experience. And so imagine my shock and awe when I find out that people don't like the opening of KH2. And not just like the general gaming populace, because there are a lot of things where a fandom will appreciate a thing in a game, but the general gaming populace at large, like, hates it for whatever reason. But no, I find out that Kingdom Hearts fans are like, oh yeah, the opening of KH2 is really slow and boring, and I really don't really like it that much. What the fuck are you people talking about? I might understand what they were talking about if it was strictly from a replaying standpoint, but even among, like, people who say that it's just bad because of replays, fucking, who cares, dog? You're playing an RPG. You're replaying an RPG. If you weren't gonna, sit down and expect to have to re-experience the story, then why are you replaying an RPG? Not to mention that games typically, at least story-based games, aren't typically made with the idea that they're going to be replayed in mind. And so, you can't really criticize the opening for KH2 for being long for replays, or for being tedious for replays, when, the experience isn't meant for a replay. It's meant to be a new experience. You're meant to be able to sit through the whole thing with Roxas the entire time, and if you don't sit through it the entire time, the experience itself is not going to hit the same way. And besides, you people are being babies anyway. I've replayed KH2 twice now, and it's fine. The opening is not that long. It's like 3 hours if you take your time. Considering what I know you Kingdom Hearts fans will do when it comes to playing these games for a long period of time, you can play the opening for KH2 for 3 hours to play the rest of the game. Again, I could kind of understand the replay argument, because if you were to replay Metal Gear Solid 2, they do give you the option of starting from the plant chapter. which I know earlier in this episode I didn't remember what it was called, but that's because I'm actually recording this on a different day, because I knew the Kingdom Hearts discussion would take me a minute. But to get back to the point, I know that Metal Gear Solid 2 gives you the option of starting from the plant chapter, and so I can understand why people might want that same thing for Kingdom Hearts 2, where it just says, do you want to play the Roxas chapter, yes or no, or, you know, anything like that. But honestly, if you ask me, I don't think that Metal Gear Solid 2 should give you that option either, because the Tanker chapter is very important to Metal Gear Solid 2, and it serves as a perfect intro to that game. Point being, I think Kingdom Hearts fans are babies. However, something I will give the Kingdom Hearts fans is that they were completely right about Kingdom Hearts 2 being a fucking fantastic game, and probably the best one in the series. No, sorry, not probably. Other people say that it's probably the best one in the series. I say that it is the best one in the series, and there's really no debate there. Because, like, well, I mean, have you played Kingdom Hearts 2? It's like a fantastic action RPG. I don't really want to get into actually every single aspect of Kingdom Hearts 2 that makes it fantastic, but the story, we were talking about the Roxas part of the game, but even just coming up to the ending of the game, it's magnificent. And I'm not going to spoil it for anybody because you should really experience it for yourself, of course, including playing the prologue. And in terms of gameplay, it's kind of just everything that Kingdom Hearts 1 wasn't. The only thing that I'll say was a downgrade from Kingdom Hearts 1 to 2 is that magic is nowhere near as important. Because in Kingdom Hearts 1, Fire, Blizzard, and Thunder were your main three magics, and you used them all the time. And then even beyond them, Stop and Arrow were also really useful. Not quite as used since they took up more magic, but they were still incredibly useful. And then even Gravity had its very niche use on certain enemies, which would make those certain enemies way, way easier to fight. But in Kingdom Hearts 2, Fire is kind of useless. Like, it's good for a little bit of extra damage if you're surrounded on all sides by enemies, but that doesn't happen all that often in Kingdom Hearts 2. And once you get farther in the game, you get more Keyblade skills that will allow you to just hit multiple enemies anyway, so Fire absolutely got shit-canned. Blizzard is just horrible, and there's never going to be any reason to ever use it. It's like Fire from the first game, where it's just one single ball of a projectile, but unlike Fire from the first game, it doesn't home in on enemies, so more often than not, you're just going to end up missing the Blizzard completely, and even if you do hit it, it's not going to do that much damage, so why'd you even risk it in the first place? And Thunder is still useful, but it's lost quite the same AoE capability that it had in Kingdom Hearts 1, and so even though it's still used, it's still not very good. Then the other three magics got replaced by Reflect and Magnet, which are incredibly useful, but in reality, they aren't really spells in the same way that the last ones were. Because Reflect is just there as a counter move, even though it is incredibly good, it's still just a counter move, something you'll use in between your Keyblade combos. And Magnet just serves to set enemies up for you to hit them with your Keyblade. I guess you could argue that's kind of what Stop, Gravity, and Arrow did in the first game anyway, since none of those spells by themselves could kill enemies. But the point is that even though those three just got replaced, the offensive trio just got worse. So magic as a whole is very much brought down in Kingdom Hearts 2, except for one spell. In Kingdom Hearts 1, Cure was pretty straightforward. For a little bit of your magic, you heal yourself. That's it. But in Kingdom Hearts 2, now it takes all of your magic to heal yourself. And like I mentioned earlier with Kingdom Hearts 1, I originally wasn't a fan of this. I thought it was stupid that I had to get rid of all of my magic just to be able to heal myself. But upon playing Kingdom Hearts 3, and then coming back to Kingdom Hearts 2, and being told things about Kingdom Hearts 2, there are a few things I realized. For one, yes, Cure takes all of your magic, but it doesn't matter how much of your magic, if that makes sense. Whether you have 100 MP or 1 MP, Cure will always heal you the exact same amount. And so the game becomes the nuanced puzzle of skill expression. How long and how much magic can you get out of a fight before you just have to resort to being able to heal yourself? And then once you have healed yourself, how long can you last in that fight without being able to do it until your MP is finished recharging? And speaking of, that status you're in when you're charging your MP in Kingdom Hearts 2 is what brings the game to the other part of Kingdom Hearts 2 that makes it so much better than any other game in the series, and that is the drive forms. I went through my entire first playthrough of Kingdom Hearts 2 not knowing that MP charge made your drive form recharge faster, because it turns out that the game really only tells you this in one box of dialogue from Merlin, which is also completely missable. But when I found this out prior to my second playthrough of the game, it made that second playthrough way better, because I could pop Valor Form like whenever I wanted. And make no mistake, the drive forms are the most fun way to play Kingdom Hearts 2. There's only really two things that suck about them, which is that one, grinding up their levels is annoying and takes too long, and two, that Wisdom Form kinda sucks. But getting to use drive forms in basically every boss fight in the game once you've done enough damage while you're in MP charge, makes every single boss in the game way more fun. except for the few that just don't give you very many opportunities to wail on them, but those are in the minority, so who cares? Kingdom Hearts 2 really was the peak of Kingdom Hearts combat, and the unfortunate part about trying to follow up Kingdom Hearts 2 is that you can't do it. Kingdom Hearts 2 is the Metal Gear Solid of the Kingdom Hearts series, but in a good way, because the very next game to follow up Kingdom Hearts 2 was 358 over 2 days, and it very much has the portable game in a series syndrome that Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker also had, where, as a game, by itself, it's not that bad, but in reality, it's kind of just the rest of the series, but a light version of that same thing. Had I played Kingdom Hearts 358 for real, like on a road trip when I was 5 years old on my DS or something, I would probably like it a lot. But in the modern day, where I just have no reason to want to play a shittier version of better games, 358 just kind of doesn't have any purpose, and its mission structure makes the game incredibly tedious and not very fun to play. Not to say that if I had played it in the correct context it would be a better game, but just that it would be a more tolerable game. The game itself is always just gonna be a shittier version of Kingdom Hearts. I guess I can say the story's kinda nice, but it's very self-contained, and is told through very disparate events that happen over 358 days. Though, like Kingdom Hearts 2, its ending is probably the best part. Which brings us, unfortunately, to Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, which is the next real-ass Kingdom Hearts game. Because 358 is definitely a real Kingdom Hearts game, but it was definitely made as a lower priority Kingdom Hearts game, because its story takes place in an in-between chapter that we didn't necessarily need, and Kingdom Hearts 2's ending doesn't really allude to 358 at all. The secret ending for Kingdom Hearts 2 was for Birth by Sleep, but I guess that placed a little bit too much importance on Birth by Sleep, because actually playing it was very disappointing, because Birth by Sleep sucks a lot. For one, it's still plagued by the portable game disease that 358 was, because this series is going to be stuck not being on home consoles for quite a few years, you know, chronologically in terms of the real world. But hey, this time it's not on the DS, so it's gotta be better, right? And, you know, the answer is no. The answer is always no. Without the same refined controls that the home console provides us, instead of normal Kingdom Hearts, where you have your attacks and your magics and your summons and your all of that, instead what you have is the command deck. And the command deck is like if all of your magic and abilities in Kingdom Hearts were shit. Oh, and also you can only have a limited amount of them at any given time. Oh, and also you have to recharge them anytime you use them. Oh, and also you have to upgrade them through leveling the individual skills up by doing a lot of grinding. Oh, and the only way you can get abilities like Second Chance or Once More is by putting certain gems on those abilities when you upgrade them by combining them with other abilities, none of which you'll be able to actually know beforehand unless you use a guide. And why they tied the abilities to this, I'll never even know, because it's not like that had to be tied to the whole portable game system. You could have just given those to the player by leveling up, which still happens, by the way. It just only gives you strength and magic and defense. Oh, but we're still gonna be ambitious here at Birth by Sleep, so guess what? Drive forms are back, but guess what? They're worse. Since Birth by Sleep has an awful amount of hit stun both for the player and the enemies, all of your drive forms are just going to be a bunch of big ugly hitboxes that half the time don't hit what you're trying to hit, and even when they do hit, the hitboxes last too long for you to be able to get out of danger effectively, because someone had the genius idea of trying to make a game with Kingdom Hearts 2's mechanics with Kingdom Hearts 1's physics. And the story sucks. I don't know if that's really important at this point. In the grand scheme of things that suck about Birth by Sleep, the story is like the least egregious thing, so I'm not really that worried about it. But let's keep this in mind. The story does in fact suck, and will only be made worse by future games, but we'll get back to that. To make a long story short, people really like Birth by Sleep, and some people think it's the best Kingdom Hearts game, and I think those people are wrong and stupid, and I hate them even more than people who think Metal Gear Solid 4 is a good game. And then there's Kingdom Hearts ReCoded, which admittedly I didn't play, and people have told me that it's actually surprisingly good, even though it's another DS Kingdom Hearts game. And I'll say that I just don't believe these people, but I have not played the game yet. It is installed to my jailbroken 2DS, and I will play it at some point, but I just want these people to know that I do not believe you. I might be proven wrong. I'm open to being proven wrong about Kingdom Hearts ReCoded. You know, it might be a secret masterpiece. I just don't believe you. And now we're at Dream Drop Distance, because God forbid that this series ever get put back on a home console ever again. And Dream Drop Distance is, in reality, probably about on the same level as Birth by Sleep gameplay-wise, though I like Dream Drop Distance a little bit more because they aren't using Kingdom Hearts 1 physics, and you have a lot more freedom of movement in Dream Drop Distance. Though you could also argue that that's not necessarily a good thing, because that freedom of movement comes from flow motion, which is basically just a bunch of invincible moves you have that you can spam on every enemy in the game. And like Birth by Sleep, the only way you can get abilities is by doing a bunch of ancillary bullshit, but it's actually probably worse than Birth by Sleep's, because at least in Birth by Sleep, you could get all your abilities by just playing the game more. And if you like playing the game, the main game I should say, which is, doing combat and all that, then you're probably not going to mind grinding up your abilities all that much. But in Dream Drop Distance, the way you get abilities is by playing a bunch of fucking Nintendogs minigames. And if I wanted to play Kingdom Hearts, then why am I sitting here doing this bullshit? The portable Kingdom Hearts games just repeatedly have no respect for any player's time in any way. And then there's the mobile games. They don't play like Kingdom Hearts, and I didn't play them. And who cares? The story is important, but I'll die before I ever play a mobile game that needs to be played for a main series game that don't play anything like each other. And finally, Kingdom Hearts 3. And you might have noticed something over all the Kingdom Hearts games that I talked about so far, and you might find it strange given how many Kingdom Hearts games there are, but isn't it kind of wild how there are only 3 good Kingdom Hearts games? And coincidentally, they're all the numbered entries. Isn't that weird? Isn't that strange? Anyway, Kingdom Hearts 3 gets a lot of flack from some people for being too easy, and I can understand that. It's definitely a far easier game than most Kingdom Hearts, but I don't think that's really a huge problem, because at the end of the day, it just needs to be fun, because Kirby's easy, but people still like those games. I think what people really mean when they say Kingdom Hearts 3 is easy isn't that it's easy, it's not a question about difficulty, it's a question about depth. I replayed Kingdom Hearts 2 on critical mode, and I didn't find it very difficult either, but the difference is that when I played Kingdom Hearts 2, there was a lot I had to think about when it came to using drive forms, when to use the admittedly very limited magics that I had, how to use reaction commands on certain enemies. And I didn't even talk about reaction commands. Reaction commands are fucking fantastic, and there's not really any succinct way to explain all of them and what makes them so good without you just playing the game yourself. So play Kingdom Hearts 2. But with Kingdom Hearts 3, regardless of how difficult it is, there just isn't really much to think about. You attack guys with your Keyblade magic until your action commands come up, and then when your action commands come up, it'll be a random list of things that you can do. You want to use a higher tier of magic? Well, go ahead, it's right there. You want to use a Keyblade form, which are just drive forms, but they require way less thought? Then go ahead. Hey, maybe you hit an enemy with a green circle around them, and now you have an attraction, which makes you basically invincible, and screen clears every enemy, and are so easy that they don't really count as real-ass gameplay. But go ahead. Maybe every now and then you'll have a Donald or Goofy command in there. Fucking go out and use it. It costs you nothing but your willingness to press the triangle button. Kingdom Hearts 3 just doesn't really give you anything to consider when it comes to the game, because all of your more complicated options come from the action commands, and action commands are free and come at a single button press. And very few, if any of them, ever take options away from you, so you never have to consider using one action command over the others. You just use whichever ones come up, and, you're probably going to end up using them all, because why wouldn't you? They're all free, and they're probably going to clear every enemy on screen. Kingdom Hearts 3 definitely has fun to be had, especially when we get into something we're going to talk about later, but in terms of the main game, I understand why people don't really like it all that much, because, again, they just don't give you much to consider. I think Kingdom Hearts 3 is a better game than Kingdom Hearts 1, but Kingdom Hearts 1 gave you things to consider. It was, for all intents and purposes, an action RPG, whereas Kingdom Hearts 3, it's really just an action game. An action game where you level up and have stats, but still an action game. Oh, I also guess I forgot to talk about the Gummy Ship for Kingdom Hearts 2 as well. The Gummy Ship isn't in any of the portable Kingdom Hearts games, but it is in the numbered entries, which is unfortunate because, like I said, those are the only good ones. But in Kingdom Hearts 2, it was better than in Kingdom Hearts 1, because like I said, it's just a sort of generic rail shooter that isn't as good as any other rail shooter you've probably ever played. But in Kingdom Hearts 2, it's a decent rail shooter. Not a very good one, but a decent one. And it passes by fairly quickly, so you don't really have to worry about it most of the time. It's fine. Kingdom Hearts 3 decided to add an open world aspect to the Gummy Ship for some fucking reason, and so now, like many things throughout the Kingdom Hearts series, the only thing it really asks you for is your time. Except for the few times where you do have to do combat, and again, it's just a sort of generic rail shooter, you don't really have to worry about much. Not better than Kingdom Hearts 2's rail shooter, but better than Kingdom Hearts 1's, so I guess I can't complain. But Kingdom Hearts 3 really comes around when it comes to its DLC, because unlike previous Kingdom Hearts games where they did all that Final Mix re-release bullshit, they just finally decided to do real-ass DLC for Kingdom Hearts 3. And the first part of it isn't fantastic, because the first part of it is story bullshit, and story bullshit that doesn't really make a lot of sense and that I kind of hate. But gameplay-wise, it's just more of the same from the base game, with some slightly harder bosses, and a few more playable characters. Oh, speaking of playable characters, I guess I never talked about the Aqua demo. There was a demo for Kingdom Hearts 3 that was Kingdom Hearts 0.2, and it's basically just what was Aqua doing during the events of Kingdom Hearts 1, and it's a fine game. It's basically just Kingdom Hearts 3 prototype, and it's a little stiffer than Kingdom Hearts 3 proper, though I think that might just be how Aqua herself controls, because even in actual KH3, Aqua controls basically the same as she did in the demo. But it's fine. It's short, its gameplay is simple, and the story gives context to why Mickey didn't have a shirt in Kingdom Hearts 1, because that's the most important thing we have to address about that game. But back to Kingdom Hearts 3, the real important part of that game is the after DLC, because the DLC comes in two parts. There's Remind, which is the story bullshit I was talking about, but then there's Limit Cut, which is basically just a boss rush of the entire Organization 13 plus one more guy, and they're all super fucking hard. Kingdom Hearts has had super bosses in the past, especially with the Final Mix versions, but the Limit Cut boss fights, for the most part, they kinda clear every other super boss in the entire series. There are a few that are pretty easy, like Larxene, who I first tried in both of my playthroughs of Kingdom Hearts 3, one of which was using pro codes, which basically disables half of the game. But even ones like Young Xehanort or Terranort, which is probably the footage that I've put up on screen for the entire KH3 section, they're pretty fucking tough. And these bosses are where Kingdom Hearts 3 really shines, because, like I said earlier, Kingdom Hearts 3 is effectively an action game with how much of the RPG elements have been actually taken out from the series. But these bosses are all very much designed for an action game state of mind, to the point where most of your other abilities won't really work on the bosses. Most magics won't work, summons will get you to survive, but they won't do a lot of damage. No teammates means no extra heals and no action commands from them. Bosses don't give you attractions either. It's really just you, your Keyblade, and getting fucked. Not all of the bosses are winners. Like I said, Larxene's kind of easy, and I think that Xion is an unfair monster, but in the grand scheme of things, they're all really fucking good. And then there's Yozora, the super boss, the big guy, and he certainly is the guy, because it took me technically over a year to beat him. I wasn't playing against him the entire year, but when I first started playing against him, I played for like 2-3 days, couldn't beat him. When I eventually came back a year later, I played for 2-3 weeks, still couldn't beat him. And I eventually got on stream to just start doing all of my playthroughs there, and then finally I beat him, but that was after like probably dozens of tries at that point. I won't say he's the perfect super boss, he has a few moves that I think are pretty unfair, but in the general scheme of things, he's really good. And he will allegedly be important for what comes beyond Kingdom Hearts 3, which at this point is, who knows? We got a rhythm game that is, again, story important because it wouldn't be Kingdom Hearts if it wasn't. And there's another mobile game coming at some point that I don't think we know the complete gameplay of because it changed a little bit from the initial demonstration we got back in like 2021. And Kingdom Hearts 4 is coming someday. The gap between Kingdom Hearts 3 and the last real Kingdom Hearts game was about 6 years, because Dream Drop Distance came out in 2013, and then Kingdom Hearts 3 was 2019. But the difference is that in 2013, we actually knew what Kingdom Hearts 3 was going to look like. Well, to an extent. We knew Kingdom Hearts 3 was coming at that point, is the point. I say we, but I wasn't actually in the fan base back then. But chronologically, in terms of the span of time that passed, people knew that Kingdom Hearts 3 was coming by the time Dream Drop Distance released. However, this does not apply to Kingdom Hearts 4. When Kingdom Hearts 3 released, that was kind of it for the next 2 years until 2021. And then we finally got some stuff about Kingdom Hearts 4, which means that we might be looking at like 2027, 2028 for a Kingdom Hearts 4 release, which would sadden me greatly because it means a long, long wait. But here we are waiting. I guess now I know what Kingdom Hearts fans felt like when they were waiting for 3. But now that I am a Kingdom Hearts fan, I can finally do something that I couldn't do before, which is speculate and give my wish list. For one, I want Star Wars. I know that the Disney machine is the Disney machine, but if it's going to be a Disney machine, you might as well make use of it. And if Disney has Star Wars, then I want Star Wars in Kingdom Hearts. Specifically, the prequels, because the prequels mirror Riku's story, and so you can actually do good things with Kingdom Hearts story again. And I promise, we're going to talk about that in just a second, just give me a minute. Do not do the original trilogy because people remember them. Do not do the sequel trilogy because they're new. Do not do any of the TV shows because you want to sell them. Do the prequels, because that would actually matter to Kingdom Hearts' story. Okay? Okay. Next, I want a WALL-E world, because WALL-E is a fantastic movie, and Kingdom Hearts is wholesome, just like WALL-E is, and I want WALL-E in Kingdom Hearts because I like WALL-E a lot. I don't really think there's much of an argument here, besides the fact that I like WALL-E, and it's like, it's one of the best Disney movies, if not the one. So, WALL-E, please. I'll admit that it might be a little bit of a monkey's paw situation, because Tangled is my favorite Disney movie of all time, and that was Kingdom Hearts 3, and it sucked. It's like one of the worst worlds in that entire game. So, hopefully I do not hear the monkey's paw curling for WALL-E, but here's hoping. And finally, and this is the most important one, I want Oswald. You know, Oswald, the lucky rabbit. And I'm not saying that because I personally like Oswald, even though I'll admit that I really, really do. I think Oswald very much fits thematically into what Kingdom Hearts 4 is about. If the entire game is about, you know, reality and unreality, then wouldn't it make sense for when Sora goes to unreality to meet an unreality version of Mickey, who is Oswald? I know it's not what he really is in the actual, like, Disney lore, but that's what Epic Mickey did, and Epic Mickey has been put back into the public consciousness through the remaster, so if you were gonna do anything with Oswald, you kinda wanna do the thing with Oswald, right? Also, I want to see Oswald in, you know, Kingdom Hearts clothes and with a Keyblade, and that'd be really cool. So, that's the bias part. That's the part where that's just, you know, things Gavin wants. But the actual rest of it, like, thematically, Oswald fits into what Kingdom Hearts 4 is about, so put him in the game. And now that we're all caught up, we've got to take a few steps backward, because when I was replaying all of the Kingdom Hearts games, because I originally played them through emulation, but then I eventually got my hands on the all-in-one collection, and so I just replayed them all on PS4. And when I replayed them, I decided that this time I was going to take some notes, because there were a lot of things that I didn't understand about Kingdom Hearts' story the first time I was going through it, and I thought to myself, maybe the only reason I don't understand these things is because it's my first time, and I haven't really absorbed it all, so maybe when I go back on a replay, I'll be able to really understand what I'm seeing. And so this time I took notes, and these notes were not about things I understood, but things that I didn't. And I'm just gonna go through a few of them, and maybe Kingdom Hearts fans who watch this will be able to tell me what the fuck is going on. But I doubt it, because this time I paid attention, and I still didn't know what was going on. So, let's see. So, in a list of abstract or unexplained concepts in Kingdom Hearts, firstly, the Lingering Will. What the fuck is he? Because in Birth by Sleep, he just sort of like spawns in, and then in Kingdom Hearts 2, he's still just around, and then in Kingdom Hearts 3, he's still just around. But what is he? He's not Terra's heart, because Terra's heart is the Guardian. He's not Terra's body, because Terra's body is possessed by Xehanort. So what is it? Is it like Terra's magic? Is it his brain? Is that a thing in Kingdom Hearts? How come that doesn't happen to anyone else? Does Terra have the strongest will in the entire Kingdom Hearts universe? I doubt that. I want to take it literally and just assume it's a lingering will, but considering the fact that death in Kingdom Hearts is kind of a weird thing in general, I don't know what the lingering will is. Next up, the door in Kingdom Hearts 2. What was that all about? Again, not to spoil the ending of that game, because I want people to experience it for themselves, but you know, the people who are in the know, the door that appears at the very, very end of that game, like the very last cutscene. Why did that happen? Was that just like, because they wanted it really hard? Did the universe ordain that? Why did the door just like spawn in out of nowhere? Next up is Kingdom Hearts, the noun, not the game. In the words of Starbomb in their song, The Very Simple Plot of Kingdom Hearts, it's a door and also a moon, but there's another one, and it's a moon, but it's not the first moon. And in Birth by Sleep, there's another moon, which might be the same as one of the other two moons, but it spawned in before the Keyblade did, so is that just like its own moon, or is that just as a set piece thing? Was the moon actually there, or was that the real Kingdom Hearts? It spawned in before the Keyblade did, so why was it there? What is data in the Kingdom Hearts universe? Because they explain it like it's supposed to be some digital world kind of thing, but sometimes people like Ansem the Wise just sort of like go, oh yeah, I'm gonna turn Kingdom Hearts into data, but then it fails and it explodes and it sends into the realm of darkness for some reason. And what about Data People? Because Data Sora got his own Keyblade, so was Data Sora a person? Did they kill him when they turned off that program? What about when they recreated Data Sora for Kingdom Hearts 3? Is he dead? Is he a real guy? How do most people transport themselves from world to world in the Kingdom Hearts universe? Because Sora and his party use the Gummy Ship, and people with dark powers can use the Dark Corridors. There are some people who have, like, Wayfinders that just sort of fly around the universe. Keyblade wielders in the olden days, but for some reason not anymore, could turn their Keyblades into vehicles and just fly those around the gateways. But what about Pluto? You know, Mickey Mouse's dog, Pluto. He just sort of, like, appears some places. But how does he get there? Unless he has command over darkness, which I don't think he does, he's not using dark portals, I don't think he can fly a Gummy Ship, and we never see him using a Wayfinder, so how does Pluto get from world to world? Is Pluto God? Does he just appear in front of people? If anything, Pluto might have an easier time getting around the entire Kingdom Hearts universe than most other people do, because you can't really get to the realm of darkness from the realm of light or vice versa very easily, but Pluto somehow managed to get to the world of darkness to get a letter from Mickey, and then return to the realm of light to give that letter to Sora and the gang right before Chain of Memories. So, is Pluto like actually the god of the Kingdom Hearts universe? This sounds like a Jar Jar Binks Sith Lord theory, but genuinely, what the fuck is Pluto's deal? How does he do that? And speaking of the Realm of Darkness, why was the Destiny Island still there in Kingdom Hearts 3? Because the entire point of Dream Drop and the entire rest of the Kingdom Hearts games is that you return the Destiny Islands to the Realm of Light. So why was Ericus's Keyblade still there in Kingdom Hearts 3? The real world reason is because the Aqua demo had come out, and in the Aqua demo, Aqua drops Ericus's Keyblade on the Destiny Islands, but that takes place before Kingdom Hearts 1. After this event, the Destiny Islands should have gone back to the Realm of Light, where Ericus's Keyblade should still be sitting. Yet somehow, when Sora goes to the Realm of Darkness in Kingdom Hearts 3, Ericus's Keyblade is still there on the beach on the Destiny Islands, which I guess no one found this entire time, even though it's been back there the entire time? How does death work? Because it seems like, for the most part, when people die of unnatural causes in Kingdom Hearts, they turn into a Heartless and a Nobody. Well, mostly just a Heartless, but sometimes a Heartless and a Nobody. And then those two things reforming just recreates the person. So can people ever be killed in the Kingdom Hearts universe, or is it just an endless cycle of death and rebirth until you get old and die? And why didn't Eric just turn into a Heartless and a Nobody when he died? Why did he just turn into a ghost that possessed Terra or something? I'm not exactly sure what happened there either. He died from a darkness attack, which happens to a lot of other people throughout this series, but he just disappears when he dies for some reason. And what's with the prophecy about the 7 lights and 13 darknesses? What does it mean for 7 lights and 13 darknesses to clash? Because I don't know if you know this, but 7 and 13 are not the same number. So how many clashes have to happen to form the Keyblade? Like, is it 7 versus 7, and then 5 of the lights that are left just have to go and fight the 5 darknesses that are left? Or does it just have to be any darkness in any light? Could all 13 darknesses just gang up on one light and then form the Keyblade like that? You might think that, no, it just has to be all 7 lights and 13 darknesses have to be present, but that's clearly not the case either, because in Kingdom Hearts 3, they kill the other ones, they kill the darknesses, and it still forms the Keyblade, and more lights join the team. Roxas comes out of nowhere to join the lights, so there's an uneven number now. There's 8 lights. Terra and Shion both get taken back from the enemy team, so that's 2 darknesses down and 2 lights up. So clearly the numbers actually don't matter, so what the hell is the prophecy even talking about? Do the lights need to be alive? Because the Lingering Will also joins the fight earlier, but evidently he doesn't count as one of the lights. But why not? That's just Terra's something. Again, this is why I asked what the Lingering Will even is. Is he alive? And what about the World Order? They bring it up more often in the first Kingdom Hearts game than in any of the others, but it's still something that's prevalent throughout all of them. And basically it's just the rule that you can't tell people from the worlds that there are other worlds, which makes sense in a sort of expanded universe plot, but the problem is that everyone seems to kind of already know that there are other worlds, and even people who don't know get told about it anyway. King Triton from Atlantis seems to already know that there are other worlds, so why doesn't he count for the World Order? Scrooge McDuck goes to other worlds all the time, and he knows that people are from other worlds, so why does he know things? Basically, anyone who knows anything about Mickey knows that there are other worlds because they went to the Musketeers world, which might be the same as Disney Town? I don't know, it's hard to say, because it was still a sleeping world in Dream Drop Distance, but evidently it's not the same world as Disney Town because it wasn't sleeping in Kingdom Hearts 2 or any of the other future Kingdom Hearts games, so what's the deal with the Musketeers world? When Aladdin asks Sora if he can go with him on his journey, Sora says no because of the World Order, but Genie can go? Genie is also a part of Aladdin's world. Why can he know about the World Order? What about Mushu and the other summons? Are they just allowed to know about the World Order because they happen to get fucked over by the worlds disappearing? What about the Final Fantasy gang? They all go to Traverse Town, which is the best town in the Kingdom Hearts universe, by the way, and I'm sad that it's never come back for real, because Dream Drop Distance doesn't really count. But the Final Fantasy gang, they all know about other worlds, and they went to Traverse Town of their own accord, because their world wasn't destroyed. It became Hollow Bastion, but it wasn't destroyed. So how did they know about other worlds? I brought up Corridors of Darkness before, but there are also Corridors of Light. They use them in Birth by Sleep. So how come no one ever uses them again? Why did they make me use the gummy ship in all these stupid, boring-ass rail shooter segments when the characters could canonically just use Corridors of Light? That's just a few of the things that I wrote down, and I skipped over a lot of them. There are a lot more, but I want to get out of here for the sake of time. Which finally brings me to the last topic of discussion, which I was supposed to talk about last week, but evidently these 2 episodes ended up being way longer than I thought they were going to be. But I want to talk about 2 things that are kind of related to each other, and one of them is recent news, so you should all know what the hell I'm talking about when I bring up the first thing. But the first thing is digital games, and how they annoy me a lot when it comes to what consoles they come out for. Because back in the old days, whenever games came out that were cross-gen, they would come out physically on both generations because, well, obviously, sometimes they would have to be compromised versions of the games, like for Sonic Unleashed, but they still came out physically, and that's just how it was. But nowadays, we get games like Sonic X Shadow Generations, which for all intents and purposes is a remaster of a 2011 game, And yet, I can't get it physically for my PlayStation 4. It's only digital, unless I get it for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and Nintendo Switch for some reason? That has the physical version, but not PS4. Why? It's not that the PS4 can't handle it, because again, this is a remaster of a 2011 game that's also coming out physically for the Nintendo Switch on a cartridge, so the PS4 can definitely handle it. Why isn't it coming out physically? The answer is because they don't fucking give a shit, and they want to push more digital copies because they don't have to push more physical copies, which cost them money. Which brings us to recent gaming news, which is the PS5 Pro, which is going all digital, except for if you want to buy a disc drive, that's another $80, friend, to tack that onto the digital-only console. Which, by the way, costs $700. And to date, I have yet to hear any compelling argument for why it should cost $700, because the answer is that it just shouldn't, and it shouldn't have an $80 tack on to be able to play the digital disc that I already fucking own. And part of me has this tinfoil hat conspiracy that this might be a plan from PlayStation to push more base PS5 units, because think about it like this. I was holding out on getting the PlayStation 5 because, for the most part, you know, it has no games. It's the meme. And I was thinking that if I ever did get a PlayStation 5, I would maybe get the Pro. But I probably wouldn't. I would probably just wait for the PS6 to come out and hope that it has backwards compatibility so I can play whatever I missed out on for PS5 on my PS6, which is going to come out in like 3 to 4-ish years, until I saw the PlayStation 5 Pro. And now that I know that PlayStation is willing to sell a $700 digital-only console that's just supposed to be a revision of the console that we already have out, then what the fuck do you think they're going to do for the PlayStation 6? Will it even have backwards compatibility? Will it even have a physical disc drive? I can't say any of these things for sure now that PlayStation wants to play this kind of game. And so I finally just got a PS5 off of eBay because I'm not paying PlayStation $500 for a console with no games. And now we're here. I really hope that gaming isn't going in a digital-only direction because, my god, it would just sadden me to no end. And so I really hope that's not the direction we're going. But I guess I'm glad I have a PC now because, man, if it really are going all digital, then I guess it's all over. And I guess the PC is really the only thing that I have left to use because, man, I guess Nintendo is still doing their thing. This is the one time I might have to praise Nintendo for not trying that hard to be a real console. But I'm still not going to count my chickens, because God knows Nintendo could still fuck up with the Switch 2 and have it be a terrible, awful, no good revision. So, here's hoping some more. I feel like I say that a lot, especially this episode. Here's hoping. Here's hoping Metal Gear Solid Delta is good. Here's hoping Kingdom Hearts 4 is good. Here's hoping gaming doesn't fuck me over forever. Here's hoping Ace Attorney 7 is good. There's a lot of hope, but not a lot of luck. So, that's it for this episode of the Backlog Bunker. Next time, we're going to talk about quite a few more video games than just, like, individual series, and hopefully that doesn't take me as long as this did, but considering how long I can talk about a single game when it comes to these episodes, I don't have a lot of hope. So, that's one thing I don't have hope for, that these episodes will be in any way quick, until I finish all the pilot episodes, of course. Once I finish the pilot episodes, I'll mostly just be doing it like a real-ass thing from week to week, where I just talk about whatever I did that week, and that might just be like one game, so those might just be 30-minute episodes that don't take me nearly this long. But until then, these are gonna get pretty long, so good luck to me.